video, we're going to show you how to use two-sided machining to create this Santa's key. As part of Vectric's holiday make-off, I've decided I'm going to make something that's quite traditional in my family. So when we were growing up as kids, we lived in a house that didn't have a chimney, and we'd always ask Mum, well, how was Santa going to deliver our presents? And she'd say, well, he's got a magic key. So I thought it only makes sense for us to create a two-sided magic key. So let's jump into Aspire and then we'll go and start our session. So we're actually going to open a file that I've already created. And so it's got our vectors already pre-drawn, just using the polyline tool to create those vectors. And you can see we've got a bitmap here, and if we just zoom in there, you can see I've kind of based a lot of this key off this skeleton key that I found online. So I've took quite a few of the shapes from there. We'll just hide that bitmap for now, and then what I'll do as well is we'll just undraw this sheet. So we've just got pure focus on our key. So you can see that we've got vectors pretty much for the left-hand side of the key. We're just going to look at modelling one side, and then we'll look at flipping everything over using the mirror tools. Now, before we do anything, what we should do is go into our job setup form. So we're going to go into our job setup form. Now, when you are creating a double-sided job, the first thing that you're going to do is set up your job so that you're in a double-sided environment, okay? So you're going to use the double-sided option. And then for your job size, you're going to put in your width and height dimensions. At the moment, we've currently got this set to various because we've got two sheets in our job right now. But this doesn't matter for now. We can talk about the size that I'm using in a second. And then in terms of your Z0 position, what I like to do is I like to reference my Z0 from the same face on both sides. So for the top side, so block number 1, I like to do that off the material surface. And then when I come to flip the material over for the bottom side, I like to do that off the machine bed. That way I'm zeroing off the same side, and it just means that we're always referencing from the same face. XY datum position, we're putting that in the lower left hand corner, and then our flip direction between sides, I'm flipping from left to right. You can go from bottom to top, it's totally up to you how you prefer to flip that over. And then in terms of our modelling resolution, we're going to go with very high, and then we'll go ahead and just OK that. Right then, so we're pretty much ready to start modelling. So before we do that, we're just going to go into our component tree, and then we're going to go into our levels. I'm going to right click and we're going to rename this level, and we're going to call this one key. Then we'll go back to our design tab to start creating our components. So we're just going to go and tile our windows so we can see the 2D in the left and the 3D view in the right hand side. And we're going to start by creating the main bulk of the key. And we're going to use this vector over here. And you can see that the way I've drew it is I've drew it from the centre, and I've drew the left profile of that portion of the key where I've joined it back up to the centre line here. And the reason for that is I'm going to look at using the turn and spin tool in order for us to create that shape. And what the turn and spin tool does is, well, for the turn, it basically takes the profile and it just turns it about the centre line of the start and end points of your vector, which is perfect for things like this. So you can find that tool over here, and when we click on that, that's going to open up the turn and spin tool. We're going to use the turn option, and we're just going to go ahead and press apply, and you can see it's created that shape for us, which is exactly what I want there. So I'm happy with that. We'll just close out. Next up, we're just going to maximize the 3D view, so we've got more of a focus there. And now we're going to look at starting to create some shapes using various profile shape tools that we can access from the design tab over here. So to start, let's take a look at the bottom portion of our key. So we'll just zoom in over here. And all I need for this shape is just a flat shape. So we're going to use the flat shape option. We'll set the combine mode of that to merge. And then we're just going to assign a height here, okay? So something like that. That looks okay. Now, when I am modelling up all these shapes, I need to be a bit conscious of the fact that I am going to be creating a copy of all of these components over to the underside. So at the moment, we can see that this is 0.14. So essentially, when we copy that over, it's going to be double that. So be mindful of those sorts of height settings that you're going to apply in here. In this case, what I might do is I might just look at making that 125. We'll just enter that in like so. Okay, so that's that flat shape. So next up, we're just going to come over to the top over here, and then we'll look at modelling the top portion, or like the handle part of our key. So we're going to start by creating a shape using this swirl. So we're looking at the handle here, and we're going to use the rounded shape option. Again, we're going to set that to merge, and we're going to assign a profile. So I'm just going to whack that all the way up to 90 degrees. Okay, so we've got a full, nice rounded shape there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at applying a little bit of a base height here. Then we could take a look at that. We just bring that up like so. Okay, now the material thickness that I am working with, if we just pop out a second, if we just go to our sheets, you can see that I'm currently working with a sheet that is 9 by 20. And my material thickness is 1.259. So I need to be mindful that I'm not going to go over that value. So essentially, I think what we should do is focus on our model being around 1.2 in total, maybe a little bit less, but obviously we've got half that because we're working with the top side. So I just got to be mindful of my heights there. So go back to the design tab. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to look at modelling in some other options. So we've got this circle here. So we're going to go back into our round shape tool. Again, let's set the combine mode of that to merge. Pull the shape up. So it's something like that. That looks pretty nice. And if we wanted to, we could apply a little bit of a base. And you can see that's looking pretty good over there also. And then we'll just come over to the top and we'll take this circle. And again, let's just pull a shape out here. So something like that. And then perhaps a little bit of a base just to raise that up a little bit. That's not looking too bad. Okay, that's that. And then what we'll do is we'll take these two vectors. This is going to be like a loop for us to, perhaps you could put a ribbon through there. Perhaps it's just there as decoration. We'll just put a little bit of a base height in there also to raise that up. And then again, we'll take this handle and we'll go in and apply some height in there with the angle. And then we'll put in a little bit of a base like so. And then finally we'll take this circle into that rounded shape and we'll just raise the base height like so. And that's pretty much that. Okay, so it's not too bad. And then finally what we'll do is we'll create a nice sort of chamfered flat shape for this plaque, where ultimately we could look at carving in Santa's initials. So we'll take that. This time we're going to use the angled shape. Okay, so here we're going to put in an absolute steep angle in there. We'll set the combine mode of that to merge. But then what we're going to do, we're going to use this option here, where we're basically capping off that angle to create a flat shape. Okay, and you can see you can do this so well now in version 12. It looks really nice. Again, that's still quite steep, so let's just back that off ever so slightly. We might even want to just back that angle off a little bit as well, so maybe make the angle shallower, and then perhaps we'll just up that height so we have more of a chamfer. Okay, something like that looks pretty nice. Okay, so happy with that there. We'll check the overall heights. Okay, might want to add in a little bit of base height here. Let's just increase that ever so slightly. So it's something like that. Okay, that's not too bad. And then we'll close out. So the final thing that I want to do now is I just want to take this component here, this component here, and this component here. We're going to look at applying a general smooth over. So it's going to tell me that we are going to be baking this. If I go in and continue with the smoothing, that's okay. I'm not too fussed about retaining the original components. I'm happy to just bake that all together so it's one component now. And we'll just apply a smooth over there. So you can see we've got the smooth. So we'll just bake that. Perhaps we'll apply another smooth and just see the effect of that. If we maximise that and take a look at that, and then again, we'll just go ahead, press OK. I'm pretty happy with the way that that looks as well. Finally, we've just got to take that, Control Shift and H, we'll flip that over horizontally like so, and then that's pretty much it. Okay, so at this stage we can take a good look at our part. Might help us if we just temporarily hide those vectors for now so we can have a good look at our shape. And then what I might do is I might just look at nudging some of these parts over. What we could even do is just take a look at everything as a whole. Okay, so we've got a total height there of 0.55, so I might just increase the base ever so slightly, like so, and then we can see what we've got there. So that's not too bad. And I can see we also need to look at creating a copy of that as well. So Control Shift and H, and that's pretty much that. Right then, so if we go over here, I'm going to look at this option to scale Z height of model. And if we click on that, we can see we currently have a total height there of 0.59, which is good. We're below the 0.6, because obviously we're going to double that. So it leaves us a little bit of room on top for us to have a little bit of material, just in case we've got any discrepancies in our material thickness. Okay then, so I'm happy with that. So all we need to do now is we need to take all of those components. Okay, so if we just go into our component tree, we're going to take all of those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to say copy to the other side. Okay, and then what that does is, because of the way we've set up our software, where we went into our job setup form and we chose which way we wanted to flip it, the software has automatically calculated that for us, where it's copied everything over as if we were flipping from left to right. And so when we actually flip our material over now, we should see all of the components on the other side over here. Okay, so happy with that. That key looks pretty good, and you can see it didn't take us long to model at all. Right then, so now what we need to do is we need to think about, well, when we come to machine this, how are we going to hold this in place? And so what we do need to do is we need to look at adding in some tabs. So let's add in some tabs now. Okay then, so we're going to go into our component tree and we're going to look at just minimizing the key level. And we're going to insert a new level. We're going to right click and set the combine mode of this to merge, so it's blending in with our key. And then we're going to right click and we'll rename this one, and we're going to call this one tabs. Okay, now the easiest way to create tabs in this environment is to use the 3D tabs that come in your clip art tab. So if we go to our clip art tab, what we'll do is we'll make sure that that level is the active level. If we go in our clip art tab, go to clip art, you'll see we've got a folder here called 3D tabs. Okay, so we've got different thicknesses here. So let's just go with the 0.75 and we'll just double click that, and you can see that's just automatically brought that into our job. And then what we can do is we can just move it around and sort of position it where we want. Okay, now we've got to be mindful of the thickness of our tabs as well. So at the moment I can see that's currently 0.125. So by creating a copy on the other side, we're going to have a total tab thickness of 0.25. Which is okay. Now this is purely up to you now. In my case, I'm actually going to look at adding in a little bit of a base height. So I'm being absolutely conservative here. So we'll go with 0.05 base in there, just to give us a little bit more thickness. But again, this is totally up to you to choose how thick. You obviously want them thick enough for it to hold it as it's machining it out on both sides, but also bearing in mind that the thicker the tab, obviously the more cleanup you're going to have. The thinner the tab, you might risk it sort of breaking free. So kind of be mindful of those. Right, I'm happy with that tab, so I'm going to say Control Shift H to flip that over to the left hand side. We're going to take a copy of this one also, and we're going to press Control and then just drag that. And then we're just going to drag that in place over here. And again, Control Shift H over there. And then we'll take a copy of that, put one over here, And then we're just going to put one over here. Now if we just zoom in, we can see that this tab is actually bigger than the actual key over here. So what we need to do is we need to look at perhaps looking at shrinking that down. I've just created a copy there, so we'll delete that. What we'll do is we'll move that over. So move that over ever so slightly. I just want it so it's just touching the edge. And then what we'll do is we'll look at decreasing the height ever so slightly. So let's make that 0.5, and then space to enter that in, or enter to enter that in. Okay, and then perhaps we'll just decrease that base height to 2. So I'm trying to get it so it's under. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Again, I could look at bringing that down a little bit more. And again, at a total height of 0.107, that's still 0.2, so we should be okay with that. Okay then, so that's pretty much our tab set up for the top side. So we need to replicate that for the bottom side as well. So we're going to take all of these tabs, okay, so I'm just using the shift key to select them. I'm going to right click and say copy to the other side. And then when we switch over to the other side, if we just go to our component tree, you can see they've been added all into that same level. So let's just take a moment to organise our levels here. So we'll call this one key, and then we'll right click, and then we're going to insert a new level, and we'll rename that level, and we're going to call this one tabs. And then again, let's set the combine mode of this to merge, and then we'll just take those tabs and we're just going to move them over into the tabs level. Okay, so you can see our tabs all join up there. We can see the thickness of them. And then also like a top tip for you, if you wanted to see the thickness of any part of your model in a two-sided job, if you press Control and whilst hovering your mouse over any area of the part that you want to see how thick it is, you'll see in the bottom right hand corner we're displayed the thickness, and then that thickness is the total thickness of your two-sided part. So it's super handy if you want to really see, like, if you've got any like super thin areas, or if there's any areas that you're worried about. So doing the control trick, just hovering over any area, it will display that thickness for you. Okay then, right then, so we're going to switch over to the top side now. So we've got our model together, we've got all of our tabs together. So now we need to think about how we keep everything aligned when we flip our material over. And so the way we're going to do this is by using the asymmetrical dowel hole method. And so I simply draw out vectors that represent the diameter of my dowel that I'm going to use. And then I randomly place them in my job. Okay, so I've already measured my dowels out. So if I go into the draw circle tool, my dowels come out at 0.315. And so I've got that diameter already in here because that's the setting I used last time. And then all it is I simply just go in and I just randomly click these dowels in place like so. And these are the dowels that I'm going to use, the positions that I'm going to use to machine into. And then what we need to do is we need to create a copy of these over to the other side. And the idea is that we are going to be machining the dowel holes into the top surface of our material, on the top side of our key. And then once we've machined all of the key, we're going to take that material off. And then because we have used this option here where we select the vectors and we say copy to the other side, when we flip that over, because we're in a two-sided environment, the software's figuring out all of the XY locations when we copy things to the other side. It's automatically created those dowel positions in the exact locations as where they were on the top side, but now on the bottom side. And we're going to use these dowel positions to machine into our spoil board. And then we'll line our material up with the dowels that we cut into the spoil board, and everything will work. And because we've randomly selected it, we don't need to think about how we flipped it, because there's only one possible way that it could relocate. Right then, so that's pretty much all of the geometry that we need now. So now we can start thinking about our toolpaths. Okay then, so let's just go over and we'll switch to the toolpaths tab. So the first set of tools, so the first thing that we do need to do is just double check over our material setup. So if we go into the material setup, we will see everything that we've got here. So we've got our material thickness, XY, lower left, which is perfect. And then for the top side, we're setting our Z0 on the top, which is what we specified right at the start. But then what we need to do is we need to position our model in the dead center of our material, okay? So I'm going to double click on this line here. We can see that there. We can also see we have a gap above our model of 0.03 and a gap below of 0.03, okay? Now we can see our total model thickness is 1.18. Now I'm actually just going to shrink that down ever so slightly. So we're going to use the set option here and it's going to scale both sides for us, okay? So I'm actually going to change our model height now so that we have a total height of a let's say 1.05, and then we'll go ahead and press apply. Okay, and then we'll close out. You can see it actually hasn't changed much of our model at all, but it's just to give us more room above and below, just in case there is any discrepancies in our material. We don't want any flat spots there. So we're just going to, again, just make sure we're in the dead centre there. You can see I've got a gap above of 0.1045, a gap below of 0.1045 as well. Okay, so you always want to remember when you're working with a two-sided 3D models, it's just easier just to put it bang on in the centre of your material. Right then, check over your rapid Z gaps, clearance plunge, home start positions, ensuring everything is safe and appropriate for your particular machine, and then we're ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at running our dowels, okay? So we're going to take our dowel holes, so we're going to take these and these, and we're just going to do a pocket toolpath. Okay, so you cut depth, you kind of want to measure the length of your dowels, so you want to kind of do like a sort of 75% into one, 25% cut into the other to ensure that you're clearing the entire length of your dowel. So for this, for the top side, we're actually going to cut 0.65 into our material using a 1/4 inch end mill. We'll go ahead and calculate that, and then we can preview that to see the effect of that. At this stage as well, top tip for you, it's probably best that you actually go in with your dowels just to check the fit, ensuring that that's okay, it's not too loose. If it's too loose, you will need to rearrange your vectors as well as obviously resizing them. If it's too tight, then you could just look at applying a little bit of a negative allowance just to oversize that a little bit. Right then, so once you're happy with your dowels, you can then close out, and then we can go straight into our 3D roughing toolpath, okay? So for the roughing, we're going to use the same 1/4 inch end mill. And this time we're actually going to look at machining our key using the selected level as our limit boundary. And we're going to make sure we're using the keys, okay? So what will happen is it's going to use the key as the boundary, but as we can see the tabs in our composite model, it's going to include them, but it's not going to cut them out entirely, which is exactly what we want. We just want it to use the key boundary, but still cut those tabs in. So we want to put in a little bit of an offset, machining allowance, so a little bit of skin ready for our finish tool to bite at, and then we can just call out 3D roughing. I'm going to go in with an angle of 90 degrees, so it's kind of parallel to the y-axis here, and then we'll go ahead and press calculate. Okay, that's looking good, and we can preview that, and that's what that would look like. So that's to your top side. If you wanted to be super smart as well, you could look at perhaps clearing these islands out as well. You could just easily draw a vector and then just pocket just those away inside if you were worried that they're kind of too chunky to not be held in. But for now, we'll just leave that and we'll move on to the 3D finish toolpath. So going to the 3D finish toolpath. So here I'm using a tapered ball nose, 1/8 inch tapered ball nose bit here. Again, selected level, we want to use the key as our level. And again, we'll have a boundary offset, so it's just cutting past our part by so much. So we'll go 1/4 inch in there. And again, let's do that as a raster at 90 degree raster angle. So it's again with the y-axis, and then we could go ahead and preview that, and we can see the effect of that there, like so. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. We've got lots of nice detail in there. That preview's looking smashing. So the islands that I was on about earlier are these here now. These are quite chunky, so a little top tip for you. I'll do it on this side just to show you if we go back into our preview. And this really shows like a real good benefit of being able to draw in your 3D view now, because we're able to now, if I just go into the freehand drawing tool, I can actually just draw directly onto my preview like so. Okay, and then what we could do is we could just tab to close that up. And then I could take a copy of that over to the right hand side as well. So let's just take that and say Control-Shift-H over there as well. And then what I could do is if I hover my mouse over here, you can see the Z value there is shown as 0.629, 0.6295. So if I go in there with these two vectors now, if we go back over to our toolpaths tab, and then we'll take those vectors and do a pocket toolpath, say 6.5, and then we'll go ahead and calculate that. You'll see that it will just remove away those areas. Okay, so I'm just thinking about, you know, the islands that will be left over. I'm just making it a little bit safer for us. Right then, so that's pretty much the top side. So the top side is done. So at this stage, what we'd do is we would take that off of our machine bed, which you're going to see shortly, and then our next stage is to now machine the dowel holes of the bottom side straight into our spoolboard. So in the software, we've now got to flip over to the bottom side. Okay, so again, we're going to take those vectors here like so. Now this time, remember, we are setting our Z0 from the material bed, where we're referencing from the same face. So we're going to go into our pocket toolpath. Now, because we are doing that, I'm actually going to set my start depth for this, the thickness of my material. Okay, because we're referencing from the bottom, we need to account for that material thickness so that it then just starts from the very bottom and it goes straight into our spoil board. And we could go into our spoil board, let's say by 0.4 in here, and then we'll go ahead and calculate that. It's going to tell us that we're cutting through. That's okay. Remember, our material's not actually going to be here. We're going straight into the spoil board at this stage. Okay, so if I go in here and if we just go to the front, you can see what's happening is it's just going to plunge straight down. Now this is our machine bed, and then it's going to start creating our cuts for our dowel pockets. Okay then, right, so that's pretty much that. So we could preview it, but remember this isn't what it's going to look like in reality, because this is currently showing us our key. We'll be machining these dowels into the machine bed, not into our material. Right then, so with that, we can then go on and think about our 3D roughing and our 3D finishing toolpaths. So we're going to go into our 3D roughing. Okay, and then we're going to go in the same settings as before, selected level, key. We'll go ahead and press calculate, and then we could preview that and see the effect of that. And then we could close out, and then we could go into our 3D finishing. So again, exactly the same settings as before. We'll go ahead and calculate that. And then we could go ahead and preview that and see the effect of that also. Okay, right then, so this is our key. Now, first things first, I can see that I wanted to put some initials in here. So if we just quickly switch back to the top side of our part, so if we just go over to the top, and we'll make sure that we are on the top here, we're going to take our vector into the VCarve toolpath, and we're going to use a 60-degree half-inch V-bit where we're going to project that onto our 3D model. And then we can calculate that and we can preview it and we can see the initials in there. And that's pretty much that. Now, you can see our preview looks a little bit strange at the moment, and that's because we've got all of this area where essentially it's the midway point of our material. And so because we are using a round tool as well, we are going to be prone to cusping because the rounded part of our tool is going to go around the edge, and that's not going to be cutting through at that 0 line, which is in the dead center of our material. Okay, so we're talking about like the halfway point, which is essentially the 0 plane on both sides. So a way that we can overcome this and solve this so it cuts through nicely is by looking at adding in a zero plane into one of the sides. So whilst we're in the top side, we may as well use this one over here. So we're going to switch over to our design tab, okay, into our component tree. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert a new level. We're going to rename this level and we're going to call this one plane, okay? And then we're going to also set the combine mode of this to merge so it blends in. Make sure that's the active level. And then in our design tab, you can see we've got this option here to create a flat shape, or we could shift click to create a zero plane. So if we hold down shift and click, that's going to create us a zero plane, and we can see that there. So it's basically a plane that has zero height. But what we want to do is we want to look at giving that a negative height. So we're dropping the plane down so that forces the tool to come past the zero plane on one of the sides. That's going to ensure that it's going to cut totally past zero. We're not going to have any cusping and everything should look amazing. So we need to double click on that, and then in here we're going to go negative 0.125 and then we could go ahead and press enter, close that out, and then we can come back over. And then if we just go ahead and recalculate all of our toolpaths, what would happen then is we should be able to see that cut through on both sides nicely. We've got that warning again, that's for our dowels for the bottom side. Okay, and then we could go ahead and press OK. And then what we could do is we could just preview all sides here. So this is our top side, there's our finish. We've also got the bottom side there, and we should see it cut through nicely. There we go. So there you can see it's cut through. We're not going to have any of that cusping. Everything looks pretty good. So at this stage, we're now pretty much ready to go over to save out our toolpaths. A top tip for you when you're saving out your toolpaths, so for example, the way I like to save my toolpath, I select all of them, use the save toolpath option. And then what I do is I like to use this option, visible toolpaths to multiple files, so it creates a single toolpath file for each one of those toolpaths. But then if you use this option, add sides to toolpath name, what it does is it will just put the top side or the bottom side before your toolpath name, just to help you remember that that is for the top side or that is for the bottom side. And then we'll save them out and then get ready for cutting. Now before we move on, I do have another sheet that I've created here, and this is a tag. So if you wanted to create an extra tag for your key, it's just a case of a series of vectors where we're either profiling or VCarving. So here I've got a profile toolpath where we are just toolpathing the sort of ball portion of that. We've got a VCarve toolpath, which has got some text, so Santa's magic key for our home with no chimney. And then we've got a profile toolpath that's just going to cut everything out. It's got some tabs in there to hold it in place. So that's pretty much it. So let's crack on and get machining that. Okay, so we've just checked that the dowels fit into those dowel holes. That's perfect. If you found that your dowels are a little bit too tight, then you might want to just go back in and just do a little bit of an overcut until they fit. You want a real nice snug fit. So the next stage of this project is we're going to take our material off of the spoil board, and then we're going to start to look at the toolpath on the bottom side. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to set our Z0 for the bottom side. So all of the toolpaths in the bottom side, we're doing it from the machine bed. And that just means that we're referencing from the same face as the top side. And so we're going to start by creating our dowel holes in the spoil board. And once we've cut those dowel holes in the spoil board, we can then put our dowels back into the dowel holes on the top side of our project, and then we can just flip it over, line it up, everything should be good to go, and then we'll continue on with the other toolpaths. Really love the way that this turned out. I love myself a two-sided project. You can't go wrong with that asymmetrical dowel hole method. And all I've done is I've just found some nice festive ribbon and then tied it to the key so that you can easily hang it on your front door, ready for the big man to come let himself in and give you lots of presents. So if you have any questions on anything to do with two-sided machining, then obviously just drop them in the comments below. We've also got quite a lot of videos that cover this whole method, as well as other methods of how you can approach a two-sided job. We've also got the tag as well, so if you wanted to machine that and then attach it to your key, you can do that also. And of course there are other projects that we've got in our holiday make-off, so check those out as well as the back catalogue of Christmas and game projects that we've got available that you can cut ready for the big day. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, please hit that subscribe button to get instant updates on the latest videos we'll be releasing. So thank you for watching and happy making.